and welcome to TheFIX, the podcast that's all about Photoshop, Lightroom, and post-processing. I'm your host, Jan Kabili, and this week we're bringing you a special episode about black and white photography, a medium that I'm very happy to see is back in vogue. My special guest tonight is a photographer whose black and white photos have been likened to those of Ansel Adams. His work has been supported by Adobe, by Microsoft, by Hasselblad. He is John G. Moore, a professional photographer of many years of experience who's based in Glasgow, Scotland. John is well known for his stunning black and white photographs, his Hollywood portraits, and his rock and roll photos. Hi, John. Thanks so much for being with us tonight here on TheFIX.
Hi, Jan. Pleased to be here.
You know, I know that you've shot so many photographs. You shoot in color, of course, and later convert to black and white. What is it about black and white as compared to color that you particularly like?
I guess I've always kind of veered towards black and white, Jan. I don't know if it's something to do with kind of my upbringing. You know, I was surrounded by family members who were photographers. At the time, everything they did, they shot in black and white. I don't know, it's kind of, it may be funny for people to imagine this, but we had a black and white TV at the time as well. So I guess when you're a kid and you're getting all these images kind of shown to you, and they're all in black and white, I guess it has some kind of influence on you, even subliminally.
Well, do you think that it looks to me like black and white is having a kind of renaissance? It's very popular again. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is?
I guess it's like everything. You know, certain things are in vogue at certain times. I guess the fact that digital has made photography much more accessible to people, and digital imaging itself, Lightroom, Photoshop, plugins, people can get easy access to software that gets some really good black and white results, I guess, you know.
Do you think it might be some sort of nostalgia as well?
Yeah, I think that always comes into it. To be honest, when I've been talking about photography to people, what drives me is emotion, really. You know, it's all about nostalgia and capturing emotions. You know, when I shoot a landscape or whether I shoot a portrait, it's more about an emotional connection, really. You know, a lot of people maybe lose sight of that. You know, I talk to a lot of people where the technology seems to get in the way and they get caught up in the equipment and whatever. And at the end of the day, I think most of us take photographs because we want to be able to connect or share the connection that we have with other people.
Oh, I totally agree with you. And I wonder if there's something about black and white or the absence of color that enables you to get down more to the emotive part of a visual image. What do you think?
Yeah, to a degree. I think black and white, I don't want to use a cliche, but I guess it is pretty timeless. You know, there's something about a black and white image that it just seems to have that aspect that it's kind of classic. And, you know, you can look at stuff from, you know, early photography right through. And I don't know, all my favourite kind of artists tend to be strong with black and white, you know. It's I don't know why, you know, it's just, it seems to, for me, it seems to just strike a chord.
Who are some of your, I'm sorry, who are some of your favorite black and white artists?
From a portrait perspective, Arnold Newman was a big influence. Really love his work, his environmental portraiture. Some of his work was stunning. There's Europeans. Helmut Newton was great. His work was amazing. Guy Bourdin, his early work in black and white was really interesting. Of course, his stuff was always very quirky, had a kind of dark sense of humour. I always loved that. A guy who never really comes up actually in conversation a lot is a Frenchman called Jean-Luc Sieff, and his black and white work is beautiful. And I guess when you grow up and you see these guys, they kind of have a kind of influence on you subliminally. From a landscape point of view, obviously Ansel Adams was the man, you know. I know that Weston kind of preceded him a wee bit and whatever, but I think Adams was the first to really kind of take it into the stratosphere, you know, and became really, really popular internationally. So there's many guys I could spend all week boring you to tears with black and white photographers that I like.
Well, how did you become familiar with him? Were you formally educated in photography, or did you just love it and go look at books and art galleries?
To be honest, I was always quite creative, and I was actually accepted to go to art school, but it's a really interesting story. I also was very interested in music. Through my teens, there was a really famous venue in Glasgow. I was lucky that both my mum and dad were really into music, but they liked different types. So I actually, believe it or not, in the break, the summer break, before going to art school, got offered a job in the music store. And much to my parents' annoyance, I was offered a full-time job, and I took that instead of going to art school because the appeal of half-price guitars and synthesizers, it just appealed to me a lot more. So my parents went crazy, actually. They said, "You're so lucky to be able to have, you know, been accepted, and now you're wasting your life, you know, to work in the music store." But I wouldn't change it, Jan. I had a great career in music, and it enabled me to do a lot of things I wouldn't have done. And I then came back to my photography. I've done okay. I can't complain.
Yes, you have done okay. If people don't know, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you shoot and who some of your clients have been?
I'm lucky that I've been quite varied. I've shot lots of different genres. My point of entry, it's kind of a sad story. I'll not dwell on it, but unfortunately I lost my father in a road traffic accident. I was there at the time, and it was pretty tough to get through. And it kind of changed my perspective in life, as it would anyone. And I decided, although I was doing really well and had a great career in professional music at the time, I had always continued my photography through that. And I felt like a change, you know, and I guess it was part of the healing process as well for me, you know, to come to terms with that, to be able to get away. We're very lucky here in Scotland that 2 hours away, you're in some of the most beautiful scenery in the world. So it was great just to get away and kind of clear the head and just come to terms with everything that had happened, and to be able to just heal a wee bit, you know. So that, although quite serious, kind of really got me back into photography, and I decided to just go freelance. I then ended up doing music stuff, which took me all over the world. I was based in West Hollywood for a while. I did music that branched into fashion stuff. But I continued shooting landscapes. I guess I've always loved the outdoors. So I'm lucky, you know, I've done lots of different stuff, and still do, actually. I think, to be honest, I would go crazy if I was just shooting the one thing, Jan.
Yeah, it's fun to be varied, but you must be very talented to be able to do that crossover, because they are different skills. To do a portrait in a studio is a different skill than a landscape in the beautiful outdoors, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually, I guess, when I worked in music, you know, I was meeting hundreds of people every day, and you were meeting people from every strata of society. So you'd be dealing with, you know, a young guy who was getting into music, or you'd be dealing with a rock star. So in a way, I developed a side of my character where very quickly you kind of relate to people. And fortunately, I had a really good career, and people seem to take to me. I guess maybe it's a Scottish thing, but I always like to try and do things with integrity. You know, it's kind of the values that were instilled in me. And even when I was selling stuff, I always sold with integrity as well. I think people really value that. So I guess when I meet people, they, for whatever reason, they kind of take quite quickly to me. So that really helps when you're shooting portraits with people, because sometimes you only get a few minutes, and you need to turn something around quite quickly. So that helps a great deal.
Now, when you are shooting these different genres, say portraits versus landscapes, do you think there are certain genres that particularly lend themselves to black and white?
Well, in my case, I think everything lends itself to black and white, but not particularly, actually. I do shoot a lot of colour stuff as well. People will always kind of remark or quite surprised when they see the colour stuff, but I actually do. It's pretty much 50-50 with me, but for some reason, people really seem to switch on to my black and white stuff. It's always been the case. I always think it's kind of hard to analyse and talk about how you do things. But people always react really well to it. I'm always, I don't know, kind of in a way, I'm always a bit surprised that people are so into it, It's like, I just kind of think, doesn't everybody shoot black and whites like this, Well,
so when you do shoot, whether you're doing portraits or rock and roll stars or whatever you're doing at the moment, are you thinking in your head sometimes, I'm going to make this color photo into a black and white? Because we don't do that anymore, where we choose black and white film or color in advance. Now we decide to convert.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jan. I do actually. I actually, although I'm shooting in colour, I'll be thinking with lighting, if I'm shooting portraits or even shooting landscapes, I'll be shooting, because I guess I'm always conceptualising the shot before I go, particularly landscape shots. It's funny, I had an interesting conversation with someone about this a couple of days ago. And generally when I go somewhere, I'll have scoped the whole area out in Google Plus or Google Maps, which is brilliant. I mean, you couldn't do that years ago, but it's so awesome to be able to do that. But I guess I've kind of got the shot 95% there in my head before I take it. I've worked out the inclination and declination of the sun, time of year, what I'm expecting. And it's really just down to the weather on the day, really, if it plays nice and plays up to what I'm looking for. And I guess I've been fortunate. It's funny, my assistant, Ricky, always jokes with me. I don't know whether people will get this. We have a word in Scotland called jammy. And he always says I'm jammy with the light, because I always seem to be really lucky with the light, kind of thing. So I do think ahead of shooting and whatever. So I'm conceptualising it.
So let's say you are shooting a landscape, and you know that you're going to convert it to black and white. Do you do something differently at the shooting stage than you would do if you thought you were going to leave it as a color shot?
Sometimes it depends on what I'm shooting. If I'm shooting and it's an image like the one behind you, actually, where there's, kind of nice cloud patterns, but there's a nice, there's a lot of areas of blue in the sky. I don't use as many filters as I used to, but I would probably use a polarizing filter just to strengthen the blues and just get a bit of separation. I use an ND grad quite a bit, and actually use it in inverted at times, but I kind of handhold it, which is kind of unusual. People think, why are you not using a £200 Lee filter system with all the accoutrements that you can turn it? But I kind of like to be able to react really quickly. So I just like the fact that you don't always have time, to kind of chop and change with things. So I guess it might seem a bit lowbrow to people, but it works for me. It does the trick. So.
What did you mean when you said you will invert your is it the graduated neutral density?
Yes. What we'll do, sometimes depending where I'm shooting, I maybe don't want to draw a lot of attention to the foreground. So, I'll maybe use it upside down, which seems a bit odd, but it does the trick, kind of thing, I'll sometimes do that, and I guess when you're conceptualising an image, you're trying to draw people's attention to certain aspects and areas of it. So I'll sometimes do that. I do it a lot in Lightroom actually, where I'll use the grads just to maybe drop off an area, or just so people are drawn into the centre of the image or a certain area.
And when you say upside down with the graduated neutral density filter, you mean that the clearest part you're using at the top, which is unusual.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, I'm not saying I do that all the time, but there's certain circumstances where you can use that. Scotland's notorious for terrible weather, so sometimes the sky is a lot darker than the foreground. So that's maybe it's a Scottish thing.
Maybe it is. Well, I wish I could be out there with you, maybe someday. But now let's talk a little about the processing part of making black and white photographs. What application do you use the most to do that? I
use Lightroom for most of the processing. I used to, in olden days, I would use Capture One and Photoshop and Bridge, but it's too much palaver. Lightroom is, as soon as Lightroom came out, for the first hour or two, I looked at it and I went, what's going on here? I thought, I don't get this. But when the penny dropped, I loved it. And I've been using Lightroom since version 1, and I just can't see past it, to be honest. I know some guys say, oh, the rocking version of Capture One's better and whatever. And to be honest, as a professional photographer who shoots lots of different genres and also shoots for clients who need fast turnarounds, Lightroom's unbeatable. It just is the perfect solution.
That's great. I know you told me earlier that you have in the past sometimes used Silver Efex Pro, but that you prefer to use Lightroom for your black and white.
Yeah. It's kind of, when I'm doing music photography, sometimes you get art directors there, and there can be, a team of maybe 15, 20 people, and you're maybe shooting with a laptop. Although I've now moved towards using a Surface Pro because I can use Lightroom on that, and it's powerful enough to use. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of flipping into Photoshop to do stuff, or using plugins like Silver Efex. So it's kind of forced me in a way to try and achieve what I can do with that, but do it solely in Lightroom. And there's a couple of guys, Duras, who's a great friend of mine, great guy, was up a couple of weeks ago, and he was really surprised at the amount that I did in Lightroom. He said, "God, I'm really surprised that you do that."
Yeah. Duras is a Photoshop guy.
Yeah, but I think he said on a couple of occasions that I've kind of inspired him to do a lot in Lightroom, and I don't know if it's just, maybe ignorance is too strong a word to use with people, but a lot of people, they'll maybe see stuff online, or they'll read something in magazines and say, oh no, that's the way you have to do it. I've always been a bit of a maverick, Jan, in that although I think you really need to learn the technical aspects and how things affect your images, it's good to kind of break the mold and do something a little bit different. If we all did the same thing, we'd kind of get bored with it, So I kind of like breaking the rules a bit, It's just,
I like you. I'm the same way.
Well, maybe it goes back to my music stuff when I was younger, and get back to the days of punk rock and whatever. But I don't know. I just think people can fall into habits and patterns too easily. And as I said, although there is certain things that you have to do, well, why not do something a wee bit different? Why not try it? That's what being creative and being artistic is all about. I think that everybody should be encouraged to kind of try and push the boundaries and do something a wee bit different,
Well, that is a perfect segue. If you could please show us how you do things differently, converting things to black and white in Lightroom. Would you be kind enough to share your screen and show us?
Yes, I will do it.
Thank you. Right.
Hopefully you're seeing Lightroom now.
Yes, it's beautiful. Some beautiful photos there too.
Yeah, well, actually, this is a shot I took way back in 2008. obviously, I probably don't need to explain where it is. Everybody in the universe probably has been there at some point.
But there are many people who cannot see what you're showing. So for them,
Yes.
it would be nice if you would tell us what we're looking at.
Right. This was taken in 2008 in Yosemite Valley, from just above Inspiration Point. I was shooting a book there at the time to raise money for charity, and I was very lucky. I think this was the 30th or 31st of March, if memory serves. And I was very lucky. When we arrived there was pretty heavy cloud cover. And I was actually with someone, a cameraman from the BBC, believe it or not, who was there to film me. And he gave up. He said, look, the weather's terrible. There's just no point in walking up to where you want to walk. But I persevered, old Scottish determination. And when I got there, I was rewarded with this, really. The cloud lifted, there was a bit of snowfall. And it was pretty spectacular. That's the shot as is, with no processing whatsoever. And I was lucky that there was really contrasty light. There was a wee bit of blue in the sky, clouds were nice. It's a pretty decent shot straight out the camera kind of thing.
Yeah, it is. It's very nice in color as is. Do you remember what you were shooting with?
Believe it or not, at the time, I think I was shooting with a 5D at the time. And I used to use old Zeiss lenses with manual adapters on the 5D. It was just one of the things that I was kind of in at the time. And I had an old, I think it was a 50mm contact Zeiss 1.7. So it was shot manually at the time, I think. It's a while ago, John, so my memory may be failing me, but I'm pretty sure that was what I shot it on.
Great, thank you.
Now, the thing is that it's funny looking back at this now, because obviously I'm shooting with, well, I'm now shooting with Nikon, I'm shooting with D800, D810, and a Pentax 645. So this resolution-wise seems tiny to me now, compared to what I'm using. But I thought it's as good a shot as any to use, just to get through kind of briefly what I would do to convert it to black and white. Did you want me to start going through what I would do with the image just now? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to see.
No worries. Basically, the image as is. I'm going to leave in colour. People might think that's a bit odd. A lot of people convert to black and white right away. But I'll try and explain why I'm doing that as I go through things. I'm going to look to try and get the sky in this, although there's not a huge amount of blue. I'm going to look to try and get the blue in the sky quite dark. So what I'm going to do, at first to do that, there's various ways you can do it, but if we go to the luminance slider and we pull the blues down a bit, there's obviously an immediate impression there. Now, you have to be careful with this with Canon sensors. The dynamic range in Canon sensors isn't as good as on the new Nikons and Sonys. And it's funny, actually. I've been so used to shooting with the Nikons and Sonys and having such great dynamic range that it's funny when I go back to the Canon stuff. That's not to say the Canon stuff is bad, it's just that as a landscape and portrait shooter, I really value having a lot of dynamic range in the captured image. It gives you more scope. But anyway, the reason I mention that is that if you pull the blues down too much, you can get posterization if you push it too hard. It's not too bad in this image. So I'm going to pull that back a bit. It's added a wee bit of definition to the clouds.
Do you mind if I just interrupt a moment for those?
Yeah.
For those who can't see you, you're in the HSL panel in Lightroom, and you're still working on the color image. You're just pulling the blue luminance slider down to the left. Yes, I am. And I'm also going to bring the aqua down slightly as well, very slightly. It's very subtle. Now, the reason I'm pulling the blues down will become apparent when I actually convert to black and white. But there's a few other things I want to do. I'm not sure whether the detail will come across here.
the image is reasonably sharp, but I kind of want to add just a wee bit more kind of detail to that. So what I would do is I would get into the sharpening settings, and I'm just doing this off the top of my head from memory. I use a very small radius, about 0.6, 0.7, sharpener about 50, but I use the detail quite high. Now, it may seem excessive, but I don't know if you can see that or pick it up. What we've done is we've added what a lot of people would call micro contrast. There's a lot of detail in that, but if you look at certain areas, there's no real noise or artifacts being added. Now, one thing I find about silver effects when I convert to black and whites, you would get a lot of noise in the image and in the sky. So again, that's another reason why I quite like doing things in Lightroom. I can get the detail of sharpening that I like, but it doesn't kind of detract from the image. I don't know whether you can pick that up there, Jan, but
it's a little bit hard to see because of the artifacts the video puts in. Every time you zoom in and out, it has to re-resolve.
Take it and trust. Try it. You know, if anyone's watching it, and you know, just basically follow that. It's amazing actually how much you can ramp up the detail without it being of detriment to the image. Well, that's what I find in my case. Now, what I'm going to do is the area in the foreground. I kind of like the fact that it's kind of contrasty, but I really want to draw people's attention to El Capitan and the valley and the waterfall. So basically what I'm going to do is I want to darken this area, and there's a few ways we can do it. We could use the local adjustment tools, and I could do it, choose a brush and run over it. But in this case, what I'm going to do is, remember we talked earlier about using the ND grad in reverse? That's right, the graduated filter in camera. What I'm going to do is mimic that, but basically bringing it up a bit. And you can see the difference immediately there in the area at the front. It's dropped that off a bit, it's made it a wee bit more dramatic. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually use the adjustment brush, and I'm going to add clarity. Now, you need to be careful with clarity. If you go over the top with it, it can be too much. But what I'm going to do, and now bear in mind, I'm not using my Wacom tablet here or whatever, I'm just doing this roughly so that anyone that's watching this can basically mimic it. And I'm going to be pretty rough and ready here, but it's just really just to show you what I'm doing. I'm going to run over certain areas just to pick out a wee bit more detail in areas where I want to draw attention. And you normally do this with a Wacom tablet? Well, it depends. To be honest, I don't always have that, and I kind of I'm not uncomfortable with doing it with a mouse. I guess is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't really bother me because I don't have to be really precise with details. I just want to kind of highlight where the eye's been drawn to there. Now, because obviously there's a wee bit of mist and whatever, the contrast has been affected in the middle here as well. So I'm going to add, again, just working this middle area, add just a little bit of contrast. I've got it set to 34 here. I'm going to use a big brush, and I'm going to just pull that up a wee bit, just to add a wee bit of definition. So you use separate brushes for different effects? Yes, I like to keep it separate because obviously from the history panel as well, it's easier when I go back after a long time, one day I'll pop my clogs and, someday will hopefully, relatives are still need to make some money from images, so it's good that people can go through and see exactly how I went through things, the process that I used.
Oh, that's a great idea. Wouldn't it be
Yeah.
nice if we could have seen exactly what Ansel did, for example? And
I think it's great. That's one great thing about Lightroom, that, if you're interested, in fact, Glenn Duras mentioned this. He said it was brilliant actually to look at your computer and I could see your whole process. It's almost like, when I was younger, I would buy books by Ansel Adams, and you'd read the books. It's kind of similar in a way, I guess, that, you can get into Lightroom and you can see, what the creative thought process was and going through the history panel, Now, what I'm going to do is, sky-wise, I'm actually going to use, let's drop that a wee bit, drop the exposure a wee bit. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to pull that down a wee bit, just a wee bit more to the sky there. Now, what I'm going to do, I'll do this really simply. I actually have lots of presets. You probably know, anybody watching this will probably notice there's loads of black and white presets that I've developed, which you can get more information on the website if you're interested in them. But I have, so many that I would usually just use that and then tweak a few things. But I'll just keep it simple and we'll go to the HSL panel. We'll change it to black and white. Now, that's kind of okay, but I feel, it could be more punchy again. If I had time, I would spend quite a bit of time going through the curves and adjusting things, but I'll just choose the strong contrast setting in this case. And you can see already it's got quite a kick. Remember, I added that to adjust the contrast. What I'm actually going to do is pull the exposure back a wee bit as well.
Now that's interesting. I think a lot of people don't think about the fact that they can go back to any of the adjustment brush pins or the graduated filter pins and tweak them. You don't have to do this all from the top down.
No, Glenn found this quite fascinating about the way I work. This is just the way I do things. I don't have a set kind of process. Every image is different to me. I mean, obviously I've got parameters that I work within, but I love the fact that you can go back and you can then tweak things to suit. At the moment, I'm kind of happy with this image in the foreground and the mid. Horsetail Fall. I'm kind of happy with that aspect. I still feel that the middle and the upper area and the clouds, need changed a wee bit. In fact, what I'm even going to do is, how much have I dropped it? I've added contrast and I've dropped it 0.71 here, stop. I'm actually going to try this. I'm experimenting here. This is probably too much. But, no, it's not too bad. We're getting away with it. I'm going to change it actually.
Now, while you do that, do you mind if I say something? You can just keep going with your painting there.
No worries.
One of the things I like to do is I like to compare before and afters a lot. That helps me to visualize from where I started and where I'm going. But when you have converted to black and white, if you do a before and after, it goes back all the way to the color image. And that isn't what I want to do. So do you have a method that you use to avoid that problem? I have one, but if you have one, I'd love to hear yours.
To be frank, no. I kind of, the luxury of being able to do this, obviously we're not in a dark room and wasting, chemicals and paper and whatever. The great luxury about this is that I can kind of do this in a kind of more organic fashion. People may be surprised when they see this, but I kind of, it's kind of intuitive for me, Jan. Every image, like I said, every image is different, and I kind of really just work on areas. My assistant jokes that I'm like the Esper machine in Blade Runner. That I kind of just zoom in different areas, when I'm shooting. But it's kind of funny, but it's true. As I'm working here, it's kind of coming together for me. But the next area I'm noticing is El Capitan. The light there's great, the way the kind of patch of light's hitting it. But again, I want it to be a wee bit more contrasty. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'll drop the exposure a wee bit, and I'm going to kind of push the contrast up a wee bit. And I'm actually going to add a wee bit more clarity as well. And again, I'm doing this very roughly.
It's
So
gorgeous, gorgeous. Would you say that in general, you're kind of a high contrast guy, whether it's mid-tone contrast or overall contrast?
not always, Jan. I think in landscapes, it depends. It depends actually on the landscape. There's some stuff that I shoot. I actually quite like dramatic weather. If people look at my website, they'll see some shots in Scotland. I love shooting on the Isle of Skye, and the weather is so dramatic at times. It's awesome, and I kind of I like to push it a wee bit. You know, if it is stormy, I want it to be even more dramatic. You know, I guess Adams, I think in a couple of interviews I saw, was kind of similar in that way. Is it a true representation of what I saw at the time? Yeah, that's how it felt for me, I guess. Sometimes I want it to be quite dramatic, but there may be occasions where, in a portrait, for instance, where I don't want the kind of blacks to be strong. You know, I want it to be kind of more in the mid. So I guess what I'm saying is it depends on the image, John.
It does. And you know what I think, John, too? It depends on, I mean, a lot of what you're doing is your skill at painting tone, light and dark tone in Lightroom, but also you started with an amazing image. And I think that's something that maybe people forget. There's some, what is it, crud in, crud out type of approach.
Yeah.
When you start with a great photo, you're halfway to ending up with what you want.
We have a great saying in Scotland for that, but I think for diplomatic reasons, I don't think I should say it live on air, to be honest.
I know, I was going to say that too, but I didn't.
Well, it kind of sums it up pretty nice, you know, but I'll refrain from that at the moment. Regular followers in Google Plus will probably catch my drift, but there you go.
Well, this is fantastic. It looks great.
Well, it's kind of okay, you know, it's okay. It's probably about 50-60% there for me. I would probably work a wee bit more on the clouds in here and whatever, but I hope it gives some people some kind of inkling of, you know, where my head's at when I'm doing stuff like this. I guess we're really lucky with Lightroom that we can do so much, you know, and working digitally. Obviously, if it was a dark room, you'd be able to dodge and burn certain areas, and I guess what I'm doing is not that far away from that, you know, but the beauty is that I can affect a lot more than just contrast, you know. Lightroom is just so powerful, and I feel that it's more than adequate for my needs, even at a professional level. You know, I've done that quite quickly. And I reckon, I mean, you could get into Silver Effects and you could bang a preset in Silver Effects and, you know, it would probably be okay. But one thing, and I haven't mentioned this previously, luckily I managed to have quite a strong following of people who like my fine art black and white prints, but they're very, very choosy, you know, about quality. And that's another reason why I kind of moved to Nikon. And, you know, the Sony sensor, the dynamic range is great. You know, there's not a lot of noise with them. But the reason I bring that up is that these guys, you know, they pick up on kind of grainy skies and, you know, over sharpening and things like that. You know, and you know, when people are paying a lot of money for a print, you want it to be spot on. So I kind of, restraint is another thing as well. I think people they can go over the top with stuff because they have it, you know. And
no, I know. It is hard to restrain or to even know where over the top is. And I think some of that just comes from years and years of shooting, processing in the darkroom and in the digital darkroom, and just being an artist also. Some people have it, and some people have to try hard to get it, and you have it.
I know this might sound oversimplistic, but I kind of like things to be understated, Jan. You know, I don't really like. I've kind of always liked cool that whispers, not cool that shouts, really. And I kind of like things to be understated. I actually did a print of this shot which I had in the studio, and there's a another photographer, I know, a really well-known photographer, landscape photographer, and they came in and they looked at the print and went, Hasselblad, and I kind of laughed, you know what I mean? I thought, actually, you'd be really surprised to find out that it was a Canon 5D. But it's all in the way you do it, You made a good point that you have to have a good image in the first place, and I think capturing your image, getting your exposure right, obviously focus and stuff like that is imperative. I get really, Ricky, my assistant, jokes I'm obsessive compulsive, but one thing that really gets me is horizons as well in photographs. I see so many shots, Google Plus, it drives me crazy with horizons that are squinty and stuff like that. So you kind of really need to get it right in camera, Jan.
Yeah.
I agree with you with that. But once you've got that, the sky's your limit, really. You can then, do all this kind of stuff and tweak it, but you need to have a good image in the first place. I'm just trying to think if there's something that I could add to this I've missed, but it would be more fine tweaking, Jan, really, in just certain areas. I would maybe do some slight work around the waterfall and then pick out certain areas. And again, it's hard to see, the detail of what I'm doing on the web at this kind of resolution. But if you actually saw the print, if you saw like a 30 by 20 print or whatever in front of you, you can spend a lot of time looking at this.
Well, that reminds me, if people would like to have a print of this or any of your other marvelous photos, tell us where they can go, the URL of your website.
It's nothing's ever easy with me, Jan. I used to sell open edition prints, but I kind of stopped. I kind of concentrate more on the kind of high end. I actually sell my stuff through Saatchi Art. And it's probably a bit pricey for a lot of people, to be honest, but I've got a kind of quite a strong following on there, and I'm kind of happy with that. I do get asked a lot about open edition prints. I don't know, it just didn't work for me, Jan. I'll not bore you with the details, but if people want to see more of the work, they can check out the website. They can go to johngmoore.com, or there's links there to the kind of Saatchi galleries and stuff like that.
So we can at least see them online. Why don't you unshare your screen so we can see you and say goodbye to you?
Okay.
That was fantastic. I mean, that image is just heart-stoppingly beautiful. It is. And I appreciate you so much showing us, how you would approach it. It's just great to see an artist of your caliber doing this. Terrific.
I hope people find it of interest. It's kind of funny, I guess maybe because I've been doing it for so long, it just seems so intuitive and so normal to me that I kind of reckon everybody processes like that. So it's always kind of nice when, I always feel quite humbled when people, say things like that. So I just hope it's been of use to people, that they find it a benefit. I do have, Glenn's got me fired up with a YouTube channel now, so I'm going to try and be more proactive and post more about my black and white process. People are so interested in it that, I feel that I should kind of put some stuff up there, tutorial videos and stuff like that.
Oh, that's great. So if we do want to find you online, so we're going to go to johngmoore.com. And what's your YouTube channel? Do you know?
YouTube channel is just, it's just John G. Moore. I think it's /C John G. Moore, I think it is. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll put links to those in the show notes for this episode. Yeah. And with that, we're going to have to say goodbye to you. And I really appreciate you being with me today. It's been so much fun to meet you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you very much.
And thank you to Glenn Duras for recommending John to me. Great guy.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And everyone out there, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to see more terrific luminaries in the world of photography and in Photoshop and Lightroom, please join us for more episodes of TheFIX here on the TWiP network of great photography podcasts. This is Jan Kabili. So long for now.